Okay, it's 7 o'clock. We do have a quorum, so we will begin the meeting of the Finance Committee. And as we do that, I will start by reading the remote meeting script. Good evening. In accordance with the requirements of the open meeting law, please be advised that this meeting is being recorded and broadcast over the Lunenburg Public Access Channel, and this meeting of the Finance Committee is being conducted remotely. The town of Lunenburg, in response to the COVID-19, is currently following the guidance from the Board of Health, Massachusetts Department of Public Health, and the CDC regarding the virus and steps communities can take to prevent the spread. And town facilities are currently open by appointment only. We will have a public comment at the beginning and the end of the meeting. If we do take any votes this evening, we will be voting by roll call. Dave Asios has let us know that he's having a problem with his audio and he's coming back in. This evening, we are going to be going through the Lunenburg Public Schools, technology needs related to the Lunenburg Public Schools, and then all moneyed warrant articles in preparation for next week's public hearing. Speaking of public hearings, we did also get a notice that the Planning Board will be having a public hearing on April 12th to go over the warrant articles related to the Planning Board. So with that, that's the only announcement that I have. So I'll open it up to public comment. Is there anybody on the committee that has a public comment? Nobody has.
Just for the committee's consideration, we received quite a lot of content this week, as we had requested, regarding personnel, salaries, a bunch of other stuff. I requested some additional supporting information from Mr. Cassidy, which he furnished. I'm sure some of that will come up in tonight's meeting, but it's an awful lot to grok, and I certainly don't really have my head all around it. So what I wanted to just suggest, just to put a pin in it for people to think about, is, I think there's plenty of opportunity. We'll have the superintendent and the school department business manager here tonight. We obviously have the town manager and the finance director here, but maybe there's an opportunity for a more focused discussion around our overall personnel and compensation status following town meeting, once we're sufficiently satisfied with the budget. So anyway, just a thought, but there's an awful lot of work for us to do in the next two meetings, and I'm a little bit concerned that we could get stuck in a rat hole over personnel related stuff.
Okay. Is grok a finance term?
Yes. Okay. I believe it was part of my extensive finance education.
Okay, so with that, any other public comments from anybody on the committee? Then we're just going to go straight to it, and we have Dr. Burnham and Mr. Cassidy here to do the presentation of the Lunenburg Public Schools budget request. So actually, what I did not plan on is, I don't know if you want to screen share your own, or you would like one of the members of the committee to screen share your presentation.
Like, I don't have the capability to screen.
That's fine. No, that's fine. I know some people like to be able to control the pace of it. So,
I can do it.
So with that, yeah, Peter will. I think, we have plenty of people here who are happy to share screens. Sometimes it's even appropriate.
Yeah, bear with me for just a second.
Wait, no, my bad. Okay.
Okay. Sorry, I'm just moving stuff around on screens because I wasn't prepared, but now I am.
But no, that's okay, because I didn't have it set for multiple people sharing screens yet either. So.
Should I be able to share now? Seems to be good.
You're good. You're good.
All right. How's that looking?
Great.
Is that the right one?
It
Okay.
is.
Okay. Dr. Burnham, you probably want to speak up or turn up your microphone.
Okay. Can you hear me better now?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. So good evening, everybody. We're happy to be here to provide you an overview of the FY22 budget that was approved at the school committee meeting last evening. I'd invite Mr. Cassidy to unmute and provide any additional comment to any of the slides as we move through the presentation this evening.
I will. Thank you.
So every year we start by restating our mission and vision, because those are the things that guide the work of the district. The mission of the Lunenburg Public Schools is to provide all students with the skills, confidence, and passion for lifelong learning so that they may find their own paths to successful careers, active citizenship, and rewarding lives. And our vision for the Lunenburg Public Schools is make sure that the schools are committed to becoming a leader in education by focusing on its own values of attending to the personal well-being of its students, providing high quality curricula and student-centered instruction for deeper learning at all levels, and promoting the development of attributes, skills, and the skills necessary for continuous learning for all. So when I came to Lunenburg, I engaged in an entry process, and through that process, I solicited input from a variety of stakeholders. And from that came a report that summarized what I learned. And then we developed the strategy for continuous improvement that focused on the themes that emerged through my entry process. Those areas are transforming teaching and learning. We're seeking to ensure that teaching and learning are student-centered and inclusive by establishing effective teams of educational leaders to accomplish the essential work for transforming practice, and hiring and developing excellent educators who are continually learning and adapting practice to meet the needs of all students. Communication and operations. We seek to improve operational efficiencies, including communication, in order to increase the organization's capacity to execute the district's mission and vision. Cultivating climate and culture, to create a culture that values data use and fosters continuous learning in a climate that is safe, caring, inclusive, and reflective of our core values. And lastly, equity, access, opportunity, and achievement for all students. Here we seek to ensure all students are provided equal access to a high-quality education that is collaborative, interactive, and relevant, with an appropriate level of support and challenge so that they can become well-rounded, resilient, confident, and capable young adults adequately prepared for future challenges. So I'll provide a little bit of context. The work of any school district involves more than just the teaching and learning that happens inside a classroom. There are many state mandates and reporting requirements that have come into play just since 2010. We have all types of mandatory data reporting. There's been changes to the end of year financial reporting. There's a variety of increased data collection and reporting for grants. We had seen in the last decade change to curriculum standards in many subject areas. We have shifted at the state level to a computer-based testing system. We have seen the rollout of a new educator evaluation system, which is really and truly, if done well, and effectively, it involves quite a bit of time for the administrators who serve in that role of evaluator. We have additional reporting requirements around our mentor program. Every district is required to have a mentor program. There have been changes around the accountability system and reporting accountability. We have Medicare reimbursement requirements. Again, lots of administrative time spent tracking and reporting for Medicare as well. And last year, we were required to submit a plan, a 3-year plan, in accordance with the new Student Opportunity Act, and that will also have annual data reporting and progress reporting attached to it. So our enrollment projections, we're looking still at hopefully seeing a slight increase in our enrollment. This year was an anomaly, and nobody expected to spend this entire year addressing a global pandemic. It has had an impact on districts everywhere. We have seen a number of families, this is not unique to Lunenburg, but many families shifting to a homeschooling model, which takes those students off our rolls. Many of those parents, when they reached out to indicate that they were looking to submit an application to homeschool, indicated that it was really situation-based. The pandemic really was the driving factor, that they were very pleased with the Lunenburg Public Schools, and they looked forward to a day that they felt that it was safe to return their children to school. So we do anticipate that our enrollment will see a slight uptick. I'd like to be able to report on an average class size for you for the current school year, but that's been a really unique and fluid model. As you know, or hopefully you know, we've been operating the entire year in a hybrid model. We added live streaming to our hybrid remote days in January. So half of the students are coming into school and in classes on any given day. And there are, at least initially, there were a good number of students, approximately 100 per school building, that opted to start the year remote. Happily, we will be transitioning for the last quarter of the year, beginning the first week in April, to a full return to the campus for all grades. So we look forward to having everybody back on campus. But the class sizes that you have on this slide, really, we're looking to try to maintain this type of class size range, not to exceed much beyond 25, 26 in a classroom. A little bit of academic data. So, annually, MCAS is administered in the spring. Late in August, we usually see the release of the testing data. We start digging into that data and trying to pull out the themes and report that out to the school committee and the community. That typically happens in October. However, last spring, MCAS testing was suspended. There was no testing, so we have no data from a state assessment to be looking at this year. But we knew that it was going to be very important to have academic data available, because we knew that the concern that was being talked about last spring with the closure of so many schools was the loss, the learning loss that was occurring. So we needed to be sure that we would have some way to assess where our students are and be able to address any gaps that could be identified through the testing. So for this year, we actually secured subscriptions for some online testing tools that are, normed. We have IXL that we use for math, Lexia for reading at the lower grades. We purchased iReady, the assessment platform, so that we could test our students from K-5 in reading and math. We administered a fall benchmark in October, saw the results for the children at that time. We administered a winter benchmark, and we were able to see growth from the October measure, and we will have a final benchmark this year in May. And we anticipate that we will see continued growth at all levels. We did provide an assessment report to the school committee in March, and the data that was shared supported the need for added math intervention and a review, honestly, of our K-5 math program, the curriculum program that we are using and have been using for a number of years, along with the need for additional reading intervention. A little bit of special education data. Students can be referred for a special education evaluation, and at that point, assessments are administered largely by our school psychologists. There's a battery of tests that would be administered to a child. Should a child be deemed eligible for special ed services, an IEP would be written, and IEPs are reviewed annually. However, every 3 years, we must conduct a re-evaluation. We must reassess the student to see if they are eligible to continue with special education services. So there's a lot of testing that goes on. And again, this is conducted by our school psychologists. You can see the number of evaluations that have been conducted to date. We have some pending 3-year reevals, so those evaluations have not yet been completed. And the total number of students that we have in district and out of district placements totals 273. Up until this year, we have had 2 full-time school psychologists, one that covers the middle high school and one that covers pre-K-5. This year, because of the closure last year and because we were not able to evaluate those students who were due for evaluation last spring, we were on the clock to execute those evaluations upon return to school in the fall. So we used some of our grant monies, COVID relief monies, to fund a part-time school psychologist. We were very fortunate to be able to hire a very experienced school psychologist, retired a few years ago, and was happy to come work with us part-time in her retirement. And the goal is that we will continue to keep that part-time position, again, funding through grant monies. Section 504, this is another area where students who are demonstrating challenges due to some identified disability, but not requiring specially designed instruction, might be picked up for support for accommodations in the classroom on a 504 plan. And you can see the numbers of students on 504 plans. There are fewer on 504 plans at the primary school, but if you notice those numbers of IEPs on the slide prior, the number of IEPs at the primary school is higher. Behavioral health. We anticipated that this would be an area of need. 2 years ago, we formed a behavioral health advisory council, and that advisory group worked last spring to make sure that we were able to meet the needs of our students while we were in shutdown. Members of this particular group were involved in the development of our reopen plan for this past fall. And they have been an integral part of the work that we have been doing all year long to support students with demonstrated need, socially, emotionally, behaviorally, broadly in mental health. This year, we grant funded a stipend for one of our social workers to take on the role of coordinating this effort. And that has been a tremendous benefit to us. Under her guidance, we implemented a universal referral process in October. A form was developed and provided to the staff with explanation as to how to refer a student to the behavioral health support team if there were any mental health concerns at all. So as of early March, we had 10 identified students, 58 students identified at Turkey Elementary, middle school 25, and high school 35. And as you can imagine, those numbers fluctuate, and they don't usually fluctuate in a reduction direction. We're typically identifying more kids that need support. Just to provide some historic perspective regarding Chapter 70 funding, you can see the percentage of the school department budget since FY18, what percentage has been funded by Chapter 70 funds. So what is the recommended budget? Let me take you through some of the process. So the priorities for developing the budget really were focused around meeting student needs and aligning with that strategy for continuous improvement, those 4 big objective areas that I addressed at the beginning of this presentation. We begin the budget process in the school department actually in August. So in August and September, the district leadership team reviewed and revised the strategy for continuous improvement. We looked at that document again with a COVID-19 lens. And we worked to be sure that the school improvement plan goals for each school, my goals, the goals of the administration, and the teachers' goals for their educator plan, part of their evaluation, were all aligned with the strategy, the objectives in the strategy. In October, department leaders and building administrators developed their FY22 budget request, focused on the highest impact for teaching and learning, and alignment with those strategy objectives. And in November, the budgets were submitted to me, and Mr. Cassidy and I review all of the budget requests with the members of the leadership team. We also in November started to work on revising the 5-year staffing plan. By December, the 5-year staffing plan was finalized and submitted to the town manager to be incorporated in the 5-year financial forecast to be presented in January. And the year 1 positions of that 5-year staffing plan were presented to the school committee as identified needs. In January, the leadership team prioritized those year one positions, and we worked to identify those deemed most critical to be included in the FY22 budget. 3 budget scenarios were developed and presented to the school committee in January, and by February, district staff were invited to a presentation on the budget, and the school committee was also provided budget updates at regular meetings in February. Again, just for a little bit of perspective for recent years, FY22, we were lucky and fortunate to receive a 3% increase for our budget, which was greatly appreciated. It allowed us to better meet the needs of the students that were identified at that time. FY21, in the current year, the COVID year, we had a 1.58% increase. And what we are looking at now for a recommended FY22 is a 2.5. And this is the budget that was recommended to the school committee and approved last night. And this is the breakdown of the FY22 budget at that 2.5% increase. You can see that our budget, the significant portion of our budget is in personnel. The budget includes all contractual increases, including step increases, longevity, and degree advancements. The health insurance with a decrease of 0.03%. The general education transportation increase, any proposed new positions, and a salary reserve because we are currently in negotiations with 4 different unions in the school department. So I mentioned that year 1 of the 5-year staffing plan. That is the staffing plan now that's been revised to carry from FY22 through 26. And you can see all of these positions that are listed here, instructional positions, leadership positions, and positions for services and supports for students. Those positions that are in red are the positions on this list that we are not funding in the local budget, nor are we funding through other funding sources. So the new budgeted positions, partial salary for a director of teaching and learning position. That is a position that was put in as interim this year, and we were able to do that as a result of grant funds that came to the district. There's an assistant principal position at the pre-K 5 level. We have 1 assistant principal right now that is split between the 2 buildings. Adding an assistant principal would allow for us to dedicate an assistant principal to each of the schools. These positions actually are a critical component of the response team in dealing with students at the younger grades who are having some challenge regulating themselves and their behaviors. They can often be disruptive in the classroom, and having the consistency of a face that you recognize, someone that you build rapport with and trust available to you when you're having a bad day, can make a very significant difference. Our assistant principals have that challenge of not being there every day. And as you can imagine, our littlest learners don't always wait to have a bad day for a day that the assistant principal might be in the building to provide them with the supports that they need. So this is going to be a significant add to our structure. We're also carrying a kindergarten teacher and kindergarten paraprofessional. We know that some parents unenrolled their students. They had registered for kindergarten back in February of 2020 and then unenrolled them with COVID coming in. So I'm not sure yet that our kindergarten registration numbers are reliable at this time. So we're going to carry that position because it might be a needed position depending on the enrollment. We're also going to be funding a substitute nurse. This allows us to keep our middle school nurse in the role of health and safety officer. Katie McGuire, our middle school nurse, this year stepped into that role. Critical role for us this year, constant communication with our local Board of Health and handling all of the reporting to the state on any COVID positive cases, as well as coordinating with the nurses and conducting contact tracing for any of the positive cases in our district. So we will be able to fund that nurse to fill the middle school nurse roles and responsibilities and leave Katie McGuire in that role of health and safety officer for another year until we're sure that we've passed through the other side with this COVID experience.
Dr. Byrne, can I just, I got some feedback on that position or that title. That nurse position is going to be reporting to the school every single day. It's not a day-to-day substitute. It's a full-time position that is being funded out of the budget to back up Katie McGuire as she's performing other duties. So I just want to clarify that it's not a day-to-day substitute. So thank you.
Thank you. We've included a director of extended learning programs here. However, it really needs to be noted that there's no budgetary impact with this position. This position would oversee multiple programs affiliated with the schools. So our extended day, our early learning center, our community links program, and our adult learning program as well. Any hours spent overseeing those individual programs would be funded through the revolving accounts attached to those programs. So there is no budgetary impact, but it is a new position, and in the interest of being fully transparent, we listed it as a new position, but noted that it will be funded through revolving accounts. The summer program that we will run this summer, which will be targeted to those students who are the lowest performing on our new local assessments, will be referred for attendance at our summer school program. This will be a district-wide program, K-12. At the high school level, we're targeting students who failed English or math, and the model would be much more of a credit recovery model. Students would have the opportunity to come in and take a targeted English or math class to recoup the credits lost by failing any of those classes this year. Again, ELA and math, reading, writing, and math are the primary focus, the academic focus for K-8. We are adding a social emotional learning element to the K-8. At the high school level, that social emotional behavioral health element is going to look more like group counseling sessions that will be offered to students. There may be some need for individual or small group counseling sessions at the K-8 level as well, but not as broadly as at the high school level. The funding for this program is going to fund teacher positions, counselors, paraprofessionals, and a site coordinator. And lastly, we're adding some stipended positions, curriculum team leaders. We're looking to establish some internal structures for curriculum work and curriculum leadership in the district. So we're looking to establish K-8 teacher leader positions in core content areas of ELA, math, science, and social studies, and K-12 special area curriculum leaders in art, music, health and PE, library media, and technology. These positions will be stipended and awarded to current teachers in our district. They would just be taking on some leadership role in the curriculum area. We have some additional new positions that are actually being offset by reduction of other positions. So at the high school level, we have some retirements in our guidance department. We're going to leave one of those retirements unfilled, and that then provides the offset for an assistant principal, another assistant principal at the 612 level. We currently provide additional administrator type support through dean positions, and those are stipended positions. Those would be current teachers or staff that take on some added administrative duties in support of the school administration. Those are stipended, one at the high school, one at the middle school. Next year, with an assistant principal position coming into play, we would not be filling those dean positions. Social worker at the primary school would be offset by the elimination of a guidance position. Here, what we're really targeting is a different license. We're looking to add staff that have a clinical license to better support students and their social, emotional, behavioral, mental health needs, as well as provide support and connect families with wraparound services, oftentimes much needed. And when we can do that, we can improve stability in the home, which puts the student in a much better position to be ready to learn. The social worker position, we did have a presentation at the school committee on March 3rd. We talked about the changing need of counselors in the schools. While it's listed here as a social worker, we would be looking for either a social worker, which has a license as a licensed social worker, or an adjustment counselor license through the state, and that would be a licensed mental health license. Both of those are clinical in nature. And lastly, a teacher for the 3rd grade at Turkey Hill, because that very large class from, a few years ago, that really large kindergarten class, they are actually heading on to Turkey Hill Elementary next year. This year, that bubble class is in the 2nd grade, and this year in the budget, we added a 6th 2nd grade classroom to keep class sizes in our target zone. But as those kiddos move on and our 1st graders move up next year to 2nd grade, 5 classrooms should be adequate to handle the current enrollment that is moving up to 2nd grade. So we would be reducing a teacher FTE at the primary school, so that offsets the addition of a teacher FTE at Turkey Hill. And likely we're looking to transfer a teacher currently working at the primary school up to the Turkey Hill Elementary. And we also presented grant-funded positions. Again, these were identified need, And we're lucky to have additional grant monies coming in. And because we have those grant monies coming in, we're able to fund these additional needed positions. So we're looking to add a third social worker. So currently the district has one that is carried in the local budget. This year we grant funded a second social worker. Essentially, in the previous slide, we're looking to keep social worker position in the budget, but we're looking to now add a third social worker position or adjustment counselor position that we would fund through that grant, the ESSER 2 grant. Additionally, as we indicated earlier, we know that we have a need for support for math intervention at the K-5 level. So we would be funding through the grant an instructional math specialist. This individual will help lead some of the work in piloting some new math curriculum, helping teachers as they work to provide intervention for struggling students in their classroom. Based on the assessment data that we will continue to have next year, we will continue to use the iReady assessment tool. And this particular position would assist and oversee tutoring supports for students in need of some math intervention work. But we need somebody who really deeply understands math in order to be able to do that. We're also looking to hire in some paraprofessional positions as math and reading tutors at the Turkey Hill level. Again, ESSER 2 grant funded. As I mentioned earlier, we're looking to maintain that part-time school psychologist position. We would fund that out of the special ed grant. And lastly, fund some additional IT technician support for the district with that ESSER 2 grant. So we still have some undetermined factors at play. Chapter 70, until that final FY22 state budget is established, we're looking at the value that was included in the governor's budget. That particular value did not adhere to the hold harmless that of School Superintendents Association of School Committees has been advocating for. We've been asking them to base Chapter 70 funding off of a more stable student enrollment. We had advocated for use of the FY19 October 1 reported enrollment for districts. I have had a conversation with local legislators on this, and they have assured me that they understand that this is a problem that they've been discussing, and they are looking to advocate for the funding to be based off of a more stable student enrollment figure. So there is a good possibility that number will be increased. Circuit breaker, we never learn about circuit breaker until the current fiscal year is over, but we're anticipating a value to cover approximately 65% of costs. And our federal and state grants allocations are not typically announced for those entitlement grants like Title I, Title II, Title IV until July. And we're anticipating level funding of those grant areas as well. Some additional factors here for our budget. As I've mentioned prior, we are currently bargaining contracts with the teachers union, the custodians, the paraprofessionals, and the food service staff. And there are still 2 additional individual contracts that have not yet been finalized. finalized. But we do have that salary reserve in this budget for that purpose. I always conclude with this statement that as we see growth and demographic changes in need of our students, level service budgets will not allow the district to continue to perform at or above the state in terms of student achievement and growth. We need to invest in the operational budget of the schools to ensure that we can continue to meet our students' needs. Based on the grant funding that's coming to support the COVID impact to schools, we're very fortunate that we've identified needs, and those needs also align with COVID-related impact needs. And we've been able to fund positions that we had previously identified as need that also help us meet the need that has come as a result of COVID. So for right now, we feel fortunate that that funding source is available, and that we feel that we're in a pretty good position in the fall to meet the needs of our students. But we will continue to assess that and make adjustments as warranted. So the timeline, we're at the end of the timeline. You're the second to last stop on the timeline. So here we are tonight presenting our budget to you. And as we all know, the last stop on a budget timeline is the annual town meeting. So May 1st. And Mr. Cassidy and I can handle any questions that you might have.
Well, thank you for the information. I don't know if I was going to have Peter keep the presentation up, but don't put it back up yet. I was just going to do that in case anybody had any questions and needed to refer back to it, but I certainly will open this to anybody having any questions at this time. And Peter's hand went up there first.
Cool. Thank you very much. Appreciate your thorough presentation as always, Dr. Burnham. Before I get started with questions, I want to acknowledge we have our stalwart member, representative from the school committee here today, who's at virtually every single finance committee meeting, Mrs. Archambault, and your chairman, Wendy Bertrand, are also participating in the meeting tonight. And want to thank them both for their work, and the entire school committee for once again coming through for us and allowing you to bring a budget presentation to the finance committee ready for our public hearing, which has been approved by not only you, but the school committee as well. And I think that is difficult to do, and I appreciate the effort. I think it's important to the process that we do it this way, if at all possible. So thank you for doing that. I also want to commend you on your presentation last night and the decision that you made around the return to school. I know that there's some controversy there with good reason, but I think that the presentation that you made and the facts that you laid out are really unassailable, and I think that it serves our town well to make this decision to go back to school on April 5th for everybody. And I understand that there are lots of issues to go along with that, many of which need to be worked through in the next 11 working days before you do that. So I know that there's a tremendous amount of unanswered questions and uncertainty on the part of parents and students and teachers alike. So there's a lot of work to do. Finally, as a general comment, I want to say I think it's great that you're focusing whatever last dollar you seem to have on performance at the elementary school, and particularly around math and reading. For those members who don't recall, our last set of MCAS scores that we got were not very we did well in every building except in those two areas in particular in the elementary school. And we had a commitment from the elementary school principal and the administration to drive additional resources and effort and focus on those areas. And this budget is evident of that. So thank you. First question, specific to enrollment and Chapter 70. I noted the comment that you made at a school committee meeting a few weeks ago. I actually brought that comment back here around the effects of enrollment on the formulas that were, essentially drove the governor's proposed budget. But as we look at the numbers, I mean, it's a difference of 1622 for October of 19 versus 1603 for October of 2021, 2020, FY21. So it's really only a difference of 19 students. So my question is, with your understanding of the formulas, and I think all of ours is probably more limited than it should be, is that in a perfect world, would that actually drive a meaningful amount of Chapter 70 money?
May not be a significant impact here in Lunenburg, but when you think about this challenge that every single district has faced, there are some districts that saw a significant decrease in the number of students typically enrolled in their pre-K and their kindergarten. We did not see a significant decrease in the number of students. We saw some, but I wouldn't say it was overwhelming. But there are districts for whom that unenrollment was impactful. Every district saw an increase in the number of homeschool applications. So when you think about it more globally and not just for the district of Lunenburg, there is a significant impact for many districts, that may not have weathered this situation as well as Lunenburg has. As you know, there are many districts that did not open in the fall. And, there are neighboring communities that are only opening in a hybrid model now. So, that really did have an impact, I think, on how parents were thinking about schooling for their children. So I think in the conversation of a hold harmless and, what's the most stable enrollment number that we could direct or advise legislators to consider to look at for a more stable number. The consensus amongst superintendents was that FY 19 would be that figure. So it may not be a substantial impact for us, but for other districts, I believe it will be much more substantial.
I think one of the concerns, though, is that when you think of it that way, and I'm all for thinking globally, but with a finite amount of funding going to Chapter 70, unless they increase the size of the boat, we could wind up actually dealing with less money than more through that strategy. So, particularly since in FY19, we weren't using Student Opportunity Act formulas. We were using previous formulas. So I worry that while I understand the math of it all, I also understand the math of it all. And we learned with the Student Opportunity Act that what's good for the whole is not necessarily specifically good for Lunenburg. So, okay. There was a discussion last night about some of the costs associated with a full return, particularly around space and tables and those kinds of things. Lunch is going to be a big logistical effort, I'm anticipating. Are you anticipating the use of any CARES Act money to make purchases to help mitigate and add to your mitigation plans for the full return?
For the full return in 2 weeks?
Yeah.
Mr. Cassidy can jump in here as well. He really has been coordinating all of the COVID-related purchases of PPE and other needed equipment, because we have to track that for the grant. So everything's being coordinated through him. I think, we referenced last evening that there's some monies available in the existing local budget lines that we can make some purchases to be up and ready to go. And certainly, beyond mid-June and looking forward to the fall, some of these additional needs may still be in place in the early fall. It's possible that in early fall, we're still looking to keep kids spread out 6 feet apart during lunch. So having some outdoor seating available during lunch is still probably going to be something that we need to be prepared for come September. As far as cleaning materials and whatnot, again, I believe that we're looking to purchase from the existing budget right now. But Mr. Cassidy can address how we make purchases and then potentially charge them back to a different account later. So I'll invite him to.
And I'm not looking for an elongated answer. What I'm really looking for is we're going to spend our CARES Act money judiciously and before the deadline. And recognizing the fact that, yes, there's current year money that probably should be spent first because it, would be better probably to spend it now than to roll it over into free cash. But there's also CARES Act money that we need to be cognizant of.
Correct.
Just very briefly, we're incurring the cost under the local budget. Our grants are pretty capped out at this point. As additional money does become available, we'll look to transfer the money out of the local budget and charge it against the grant. So right now we're encumbering the money against the local budget, plexiglass shields, sprayers, additional cloth and cleaning supplies. And quite frankly, we're in pretty good shape for supplies and equipment, for masks and gowns through the end of the year. So it's this last push that we're doing for a full return that we're encumbering against the local budget, and then at some point we'll look at applying that to the CARES Act.
Okay. I just want to touch upon some decisions that you've made around behavioral and emotional health, the decisions to fund social workers and school psychologists and the like. First of all, with respect to the positions that you decided to eliminate to fund some of that stuff, there's 2 guidance positions. As the parent of a recent graduate and the parent of somebody who's coming through now the middle high school, I'm concerned about the roles of those guidance counselors, in particular, the getting on the right class tracks and all that kind of thing at the beginning of high school or end of middle school, beginning of high school, and then the college preparation activities that go in junior and senior year and applications and those kinds of things. What sorts of impacts, if any, do you expect from the elimination of those positions?
So the role of guidance counselor is different at different schools, different levels, right? Mm-hmm. So the role of the guidance counselors at the high school is very uniquely high school. Guidance counselors at the lower levels, it is more of that kind of family connection, social emotional support, maybe some small group counseling type sessions that's not truly counseling in the clinical sense. But sometimes students need, support in developing some social skills. And, our guidance counselors fill that role right now. So in thinking about elimination of a guidance counselor position at the primary school first, the nature of the need there, the most urgent need there is really around support for that behavioral, social emotional component, and being able to connect with families, provide them with wraparound support services, interface with DCF. So when we were looking initially with a limited budget and working with a 2.5% increase, we can't fit everything in. What do we think is the most important and impactful position? Is there something that perhaps we could give up in order to keep something that we think would be significant and impactful? So that's where we came to that decision at the primary school level relative to the guidance counselor position. But really in that case, what we're really after there, again, is the license, the clinical license, that the guidance counselor, Department of Ed, teacher type license for guidance. You do not have to have a clinical background to become licensed in the state as a guidance counselor. So that's the thinking behind that particular transition.
Yeah, and I think that the actually, just to go back to the initial question, just to make sure that Peter's question got answered, is that the answer is high school guidance will not be affected.
So the way we're thinking about it is with the addition of an assistant principal position dedicated to the middle school, dedicated to the high school, we can take the dean position out of play. Currently, our middle school guidance counselor is filling the function of that dean position at the middle school. So if you remove the responsibilities of the dean position now from that guidance counselor, the guidance counselor is now more available to support all 3 grades at the middle school. In this current year, essentially the high school has 2.5 guidance counselors, because one of the guidance counselors at the high school is split and supports the 8th grade at the middle school and 9th grade at the high school. That particular guidance counselor is retiring. So again, basically we're restoring our guidance counselor position at the middle school to be full-time guidance and not part-time guidance and part-time dean supporting in an administrative type role. So knowing that, and knowing now with the added social work position that could support Turkey Hill Elementary and middle school, the guidance counselor has dedicated support of a social worker that can address some of the significant needs that we reference as tier 2, tier 3 type interventions in that regard. So we think that will be enough support. And then we look at the function of the guidance counselors at the high school, a very different function. And now you're looking at 2 full-time guidance positions to cover 4 grades. There was conversation as to whether or not that model might be viable. Would it be sufficient? We think that it is going to be sufficient. And we'll have a dedicated social worker to school and not straddling the middle school and the high school. So the social worker dedicated to the high school can address some of the counseling needs at that level. We did, when we revised the 5-year staffing plan, we did put a guidance position in year 2, which would be FY23, in the event that we were to determine that this is not sufficient staffing for the high school guidance department. We would have identified that as a possible need to restore that position. And when I first rolled out this budget in January to the school committee, I did indicate at that time that this is something that we would have to monitor closely, continue to determine whether or not this is an adequate staffing model to support the needs of the students effectively. And if it's not, we would be back looking to restore those positions and possibly making other cuts if needed in order to restore that position. Since that time, Another COVID relief package has been approved through Congress, and more funding will be coming to public schools. I did have a conversation with the instructional leadership team just this week about, we're not sure exactly what we're going to be seeing in September. I'm hearing from my social worker who is filling that role as the behavioral health coordinator for the district right now, that kiddos at the high school level are developing a clinical diagnosis of agoraphobia. They are now afraid to leave their home and go out into the world. These are real mental health challenges that we are going to have to address to get kids back into school, even just physically back into school, never mind attentive to the academic elements of school, just emotionally to be able to physically come into school. So we're not sure the scope of this, which is in part why having the kids come back to the building in a couple of weeks will help us better assess what the need might be in this area. So with additional grant monies coming, and of course, we have no idea. Grants always come with parameters. What's allowable, what's not allowable, how long you have to spend, and we definitely want to be strategic and make sure we optimize every single dollar that we get. But we have already started to engage in conversation about what is the model, what would the add-on behavioral health positions be? And we may be talking about implementing a tier 1 is what we refer to all classes, building-wide, SEL, social emotional curriculum. And at that point, are we talking about, yes, guidance counselors, not adjustment counselors, able to do that either as potentially a pull-out in the specials rotation or as the push-in schedule in the classroom setting with the teacher and the students. So we're already starting to strategize what's the plan? What's the plan if we see something more significant than what we think we're going to see? And happily, we know that there are additional funds coming. So if it is necessary, there are some additional funds if we need to add additional staffing to support the behavioral health needs. So it is possible that we might be looking to restore some guidance positions that have been temporarily set aside to offset so that we could put other positions in. So it is a priority. It's an ongoing dialogue about the needs that we anticipate, that we're trying to, staff adequately for academic supports, behavioral, social, emotional, mental health supports for our students. We think we have a base of staffing that puts us in a position to be ready to assess the needs, and we anticipate to meet the needs. But if we find out that that is not the situation, we'll be reassessing the grant monies that are coming.
You've pivoted this year. I'm sure you'll pivot next year.
That's the word of the year.
I know we've been going along. I just have one more comment to make, and I thank everybody's patience. This has gone quite a while. Just my questions and comments. Last night during public comment, the president of the Lunenburg Education Association made some comments around the return, and not specific to her comments, but more, I think, I personally have a concern about the overall mental fatigue and morale of the entire school department staff, to include the teaching staff. And I get the opportunity to speak to a number of teachers frequently, and I can tell you almost universally, the feedback that I'm getting is that morale is not what it probably should be. And I got an email today, I think we all got, from the PTO that the PTO is in a pretty critical state and may not make it out of this school year intact. And so my question is what can we do and what can you do as leaders to begin to address some of these issues, perhaps not just as an administration and town committees, but as a community as a whole, in some form, to address some of these issues, because I think that this overall fatigue is going to cost us in a way that is not financially measurable today. So, thank you.
No doubt about that. I would acknowledge that our entire staff in the district, all roles, all functions, are completely exhausted. They've given everything they have every day for 12 months, because even over the summer, there was an extraordinary stress for all of our staff, not knowing what's the plan, what's this going to look like. I don't know if I can manage, right? There was a lot of stress. There's a fear and anxiety around actually contracting a virus, suffering greatly with the virus. So we have been dealing with, and Mr. Cassidy can jump in, we have been dealing with staff anxiety levels fluctuating since last March. We validate the way they're feeling. But I would say that while the statement was made on behalf of the teachers union, the members of the teachers union, I can tell you that not all teachers are feeling as stressed out and frustrated at the notion of a full return. Some of them are actually relieved, and they've communicated that to me directly. I can tell you that, you know, what I hear from the staff directly in my staff drop-ins, I have Zoom forum drop-ins for the staff periodically since last March. You know, what I hear is that the administrators are going above and beyond. At the primary school, they talk about, you know, at the holiday time, every single staff member got coupons that they could turn in, and the administrators would cover a mask break for you, or you know, cover a recess duty or something to that effect. They've, you know, brought treat carts in, and they roll them down the hallways, you know, in the wing where the teachers are on their prep block, so that they're bringing them coffee and breakfast treats, you know, unexpectedly. They're working hard because they're trying to make sure that our teachers feel valued, feel appreciated, and we're acknowledging how hard this is. I told them on the professional development day, February 22nd, when I addressed the entire staff, I don't think they are in a good vantage point to understand how amazing their work has been this year. The constant pivot, adjustments, learning new ways of teaching, learning new tools and applications. They have really done some amazing things. They really have. And they're so far down in it, and they're so exhausted. I don't think that they can really truly appreciate how good a job they've done weathering this storm. And I can tell you that they keep their eyes on their students and what's best for their students. So, you know, we're aware, we acknowledge, we created a Zen space in the high school, middle school, high school, so that teachers could just go take a quiet time out. We are concerned with the mental well-being of the staff as much as we are with the mental well-being of our students. So it is a priority. I know that sometimes they don't always feel that way in the moment, but it is a priority.
Okay.
Thank you, Terry.
Dave Passios.
Yep, I've just got one quick thing back to dollars and cents. Dr. Burnham, in your explanation of the positions with offsets, one in particular that kind of caught my ear was the position moving from the primary school to Turkey Hill. And your last kind of comment at the end was hopefully that person would move with that position. And it just brought up a question as to what are the underlying costs of shuffling personnel all the time like this? I'm assuming that in some cases, if that person does not go with that position, then there could very possibly be some unemployment costs and or some other costs. Could you speak to that a little bit?
The way that we're likely going to approach this is to have a conversation with the staff to see if there's interest amongst any of the staff to make that transition. We could just do an involuntary transfer within the district and place a teacher there. You talk about the impact, well, the unemployment impact, Mr. Cassidy can jump in on that in a second. But there's also potentially a little bit of an impact on a sense of belonging. So if you're a teacher that's toggling between, the primary school and the Turkey Hill, and now we have a different bubble classroom down at the primary, somebody's going back to the primary, it's hard to develop and feel like you've established a connection and you are of the school community, the individual school community, when you've got to sort of bounce back and forth year to year. So, as we're looking at this, obviously that bubble class is third grade next year, but they'd be fourth grade, fifth grade. So, you're looking at possibly the staff member who might transition up to the Turkey Hill potentially is staying with the Turkey Hill for a few additional years as well. Mr. Cassidy, you want to jump in on other real dollar and cents costs?
So Dr. Burnham just described kind of the emotional and professional impact.
Right.
It's my opinion there's no financial impact to it. Under the rights of the contract, we can do an involuntary transfer of an individual. Obviously, we'd like to recruit a staff member who would want to move, but there is no financial impact. Their teachers have rights to positions, and we can move them within the contract. Hope that answers direct question.
Yeah. Yeah, I kind of figured that's what the answer was going to be, that it's more the emotional side of it. And as Dr. Burnham said, the connection. And that just feeds into the stress that's already there.
Right.
So it's not helping that we need to do. I don't disagree with any of the shifts that you've outlined. It's just there is a cost to that in social emotional for the staff, and virtually no financial costs from the looks of it. Thank you.
Okay. Chris Menard.
Yeah, thanks. So a few questions. The first one, when I looked at the student to teacher ratio, the class size chart, it's about 24-1. Although, some grades are a little different. When I also looked at some of the data you sent earlier, there's a total number of employees in the school department is 251. Total number of employees is total number of teachers is about 141. So like 56% of the school are actually teachers. And then I look at like the positions that we're looking to add, and the requested positions are 16 there. Only 2 are teachers. Understand that only 12 made it into the budget. And then finally, you mentioned degrading scores in like K-5, especially in math. Why is it not better to start to just hire more teachers than, all these administrative positions and other sorts of positions that are being, it seems like we're on a trajectory to be, 50% or under teachers in a school, which just seems to not pass the logic test.
So just let me be clear that when I categorize something as a leadership position, an instructional leadership position, as an example, those stipended positions for curriculum teacher leader positions, I consider those leadership positions in the district. That instructional math specialist, again, instructional leadership there, but that's a teacher position. That's a licensed teacher position. So, the question, and it's a question that we get from teachers, right? It's better just to hire more teachers. We don't need more non-teachers, more teachers. I would argue that if teachers had the expertise to provide all the supports necessary to meet the needs of the children in their classroom, right? We wouldn't need additional social workers. We wouldn't need additional assistant principals or other support type positions for academic targeted intervention. The teachers in the district don't have that level of expertise right now to target, to change the trajectory of student performance academically, or in terms of their ability to grow and develop skills to better manage their own emotions. If teachers were able to demonstrate that, sure, we could hire more teachers and have smaller class sizes. But what we need is the right professional staffing to meet the specific needs of the children that we have in our classrooms. If you were to talk to teachers at the primary school, they would advocate. They advocated directly with me when I held a drop-in session with them to gather their input relative to how to proceed with the principal position. This year, Mr. Adams was put into this position as interim because the previous principal resigned mid-August. So Mr. Adams stepped into the position as interim. I met with the faculty in January, and we talked about the possible pathways forward, one being to post the position and engage in a full-on search for a principal, including interviews and site visits, etc. The other option, which was a possibility, was a permanent appointment of the people that were in the position as interim. They not only told me that they wanted Mr. Adams to remain in that position and that they would be actually really upset if I were to post the position because they felt so supported and so validated by Mr. Adams this year. They also talked about the assistant principal that was in that role this year. We hired from out of district. And the fact that they were a great team, and they actually implored me to make the assistant principal full-time in their building, because to have that level of consistent support for the kids, for them, was important. They noticed the difference 2 years ago when we put in the right kind of professional staffing to address the emerging critical level of need for kids at the primary school in terms of behavioral health. So they understand that we do need some specialized staffing in order to adequately meet the needs of the kids. When we can address the specific needs of the kids are not the only ones that get that benefit. the classroom, the whole school climate shifts when you have the appropriate staff to address the needs of the students. So I know that there are teachers, they have made the comments to administrators, to myself, about, we just need more teachers. I don't agree, and I think that the data points in a different direction. I really do feel that these specialized supports, additional administrator positions in the building to provide that day-to-day stability, consistency, it changes the climate of the building. It truly changes the climate of the building. So I feel really strongly that we have identified the right positions.
Okay, I tend to agree with the teachers on that one. So the second one, a little bit pulling on more of the K-5 math program. If you went through, you must have gone through some kind of root cause analysis on that and said that just an instructional math specialist would be, at least a majority improvement towards closing that gap. And additionally, like when I look through the goals, I don't really see any STEM highlighted as a goal. And I don't know where we are on, preparing students for, high-tech universities, computer science, technology, STEM as a goal. So can you just talk a little bit about that? Because honestly, it really does start, at the K-5. If you're falling behind in math at K-5, you have no chance in high school. And if you're not, the jobs of the future are kind of in the, the high-tech field. So if you could talk a little bit about that.
So the math specialist position, a teaching position, we'd be looking for somebody who had some deep knowledge of math. Oftentimes, teachers who teach at the elementary level tend to be a little bit math phobic. They're even a little bit science phobic. I say that as a former science teacher. Yes, STEM is important, and yes, preparedness for computer science type careers is important. In the 5-year staffing plan, there is a technology teaching position for the high school in that plan. The challenge for us is we have some other critical staffing needs to meet more urgent needs that are being demonstrated by the students. I can tell you right now, I would love to be able to expand the programming at the high school. I wish to see a sign language teacher at the high school as an option for kiddos with learning disabilities for whom learning a second language is a significant challenge. And rather than waiving them from that graduation requirement, I would love to see them have a different option in a language. Again, we have more urgent needs that need to be addressed to set kids up for successful academic careers from the earliest grades. The math intervention piece, I need somebody who has a comfort level and a deep understanding of math and can grow that knowledge and understanding amongst their peer group, that they can look at data from an assessment and determine how to use that data to group students in intervention groups and determine what the appropriate intervention is. Our math program hasn't been reviewed in a number of years. It needs to be reviewed and made sure that it is fully aligned with the state standards and that it's been designed in a way that is appropriate to address Tier 1 full class, Tier 2 and Tier 3 supports, address the needs of our English language learners, address needs of children with special ed needs. We need to review the entire program. You don't have to look too far for a root cause analysis, as Mr. Beardmore indicated. In recent years, actually more than just the last couple, The scores for Turkey Hill Elementary School are not good. They're not good. Turkey Hill Elementary School is performing in the lowest third, the top of the lowest third, but the lowest third in the state. We do an analysis of the MCAS data results. We look at that by standard. We look at that by individual student. We need to make a shift in our tier 1 instruction. That means we need to look at new math programs to bring in. Having a math specialist, somebody who has a very strong comfort level with math, understands how to teach math at this level, would be a huge asset for our teachers at the K-5 level who do not have that level of understanding and expertise in math, nor in science. Absolutely. When I meet the critical needs that have been identified in the district and kids' needs are being met on a fundamental level, their emotional, mental well-being, their academics in the early grades, I am all in on expanding programs and opportunities for kids. But I feel really strongly that we need to meet the demonstrated need in this district before we enhance.
Yeah, so I mean, my personal preference.
Can I just
on
add
that-
something to Dr. Burnham's comment? It's important to note that the review of the math curriculum and purchasing and implementing new curriculum is a large portion of that. The curriculum adoption line item is earmarked for that. So we'll have a specialist reviewing that, purchasing it, evaluating it, and having funds to roll out some new programs. So it's really aggressive with a high-level staff person with some local funding to support that. So I just wanted to, so there are resources in the local budget for that.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, advocating for STEM is certainly something I, personally feel is important. I would prefer to see computer science over, a fourth language. I'd rather see kids waive out of the requirement on foreign language and have a computer science language under their belt than, Latin or French or but I don't know. And then I guess my final question, you didn't present it tonight, but how complete is your 10-year capital forecast? We did look at that earlier in the year within the committee. I noticed, for example, I noticed in your briefing package you gave at the school committee that there was, for example, a additional baseball field or something being put on campus, but I didn't see that in the 10-year forecast. So I'm just wondering, how complete is that plan? With an understanding that, there's a couple potential large purchases in our future. It's important for us to get a complete forecast of the out year capital expenses.
Relative to field space, that was
just an example.
But that was identified as part of the symposium that was held. Was that October of 19? Just looking more generally, at what the future needs of the district might include. We know that on campus, we do not have any diamonds for softball or baseball. Obviously, our athletic director would love to have all the appropriate field space for the program, our athletic program, right here on the campus. So I did identify that is a need. As you know, there are organizations in town, youth groups, soccer, football, basketball, that use the facilities. And, in a typical year, the fields are in use constantly. So, field space for athletics really is maxed out, I think. So I think it was a good thing just to point in the direction that, that's something that the long view, the town might want to be thinking about.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate that. And I wasn't really fixated on the field per se, although the field is a good example also, because as we look at where buildings would go or where fields might go, it's important to have that holistic view of land associated with that. I guess my question is more of a, can you make sure that, coming out of budget season, that capital plan is properly reflected for, the next 10 years or so? Because that's a challenge I think this finance committee and the town is going to have, is how do we fund all these projects that are coming down the pike? So, thank you. That's all I had. Thanks.
Okay. Evan?
So I just had a quick follow-up from Chris's questions. Regarding the 5-year staffing plan, if what we're seeking to do here is to meet, or at least address some of the needs of the most difficult needs and the most necessary needs right away, does this 5-year staffing plan address that need over the course of the 5 years, or does this 5-year staffing plan address the immediate need now in year 1/year 2 or whatnot, and then address some of the issues that Chris was mentioning for years 3, 4, 5 and whatnot?
That's a complicated answer. It's a little bit of both. So we've identified the most urgent needs in our review of the 5-year staffing plan. So an updated revised plan was provided to the town manager back in December, but we created the first ever 5-year staffing plan a year ago. We included in that 5-year staffing plan those positions that we thought were critical in terms of making a shift in momentum and moving the district forward in terms of student academic performance, in terms of meeting students' needs with behavioral health. But you will also see other positions in that 5-year staffing plan, like foreign language positions, like the technology teacher position, because in thinking about developing that plan, it was, if we could create your vision for your school, right? We worked with all the principals together as a group. Where would you like to see your school? What would it look like if you could imagine it functioning optimally to meet the needs of the kids, and programmatically, what would that look like? And then we took a look at all of those positions that were kind of put on the table, and we started to talk about the need and try to prioritize those positions when we took a district-wide lens. I think, and I've indicated this to the town manager, we will definitely revise the 5-year plan again to provide that to the town manager in December for her 5-year financial forecast. But I think what we might see with hiring the right people into some key positions, we may reassess the entire picture of that 5-year staffing plan and determine that because we hired this person into this position, and this person also has knowledge and is essentially filling at least partial of another position that we identified, because the person has broad expertise in a variety of areas, we may not any longer need to identify that position, or could push it off in the distance. So I do think that with these key positions coming into play, with the right people hired into those positions, we may see a significant impact, an impact that could actually influence the way we look at the 5-year staffing plan. That it might be more than just a slight tweaking of that 5-year plan. We might be able to provide an entire overhaul of that plan.
Okay. Thank
Does
you.
that answer the question?
It does. No, it's a complicated solution, I'm sure.
It definitely
Extremely
is.
fluid.
I'll also throw in, DESE may require additional requirements that might be another staff member. So, that plan is reviewed. And I know last year was the first year for it. And I thought that exercise in this district was one of the best process that I've gone through with the leadership at the school department. And it was a great place to start a vision. And, as grant money became available, had a good opportunity just to open up that document and start plugging in the holes. And then when we reviewed it again this year, we didn't start from scratch. We really took a look at what was left on the shelf and just built from there. But I've heard the superintendent say that, it's a free-flowing document. So it is opened up every single year, and it is looked at very closely. As students' need changes, the plan will change.
Okay.
And I do envision a time not too far from now where we will have staffed to meet the critical needs of students, and we can start down that road that's more visionary in terms of programming and opportunities for kids. I've had conversations at the high school around, creating pathways, academies, work experiences for kids and in line with a specific career trajectory pathway or academy at the high school level. There are lots of things that I would love to be able to get to really broaden the experience for our students here in the district. And I think that when we can get to that, we will see more students looking to choice into the district or not looking to choice out of the district. So we do know that it is a priority in that regard. We want to keep students here and we want to draw new students here as well. And we're going to do that by better promotion of the opportunities that we already can offer. Not every traditional comprehensive high school has a greenhouse. We have a lot to offer. We have to start focusing on promotion of what we can offer already and start to develop that vision for where we want to go with programming at the secondary level.
Okay.
One other question, if I may. What opportunities do exist with respect to like dual enrollment? Do we still have the
Yes.
dual enrollment with like Fitchburg, and what schools do we have with that? And how is it promoted and funded? And
So I can't answer the question relative to the number of schools. I think it's the Mount and Fitchburg State. I could be wrong. There could be more than that. And that I think largely is, something that's discussed between students and their guidance counselor about, their goals for post-secondary education, career paths, and then, also aligned with their academic capabilities, trying to get into their schedule all that they want to be able to fit into the schedule. That's one of the challenges of a relatively small high school. There's limited capacity to build a schedule that provides a lot of flexibility and opportunity. We only run one section of, let's say, AP government, right? It's difficult. We've got a lot of what we call singleton classes, right? There's just one section of it. And kids often have to make difficult choices, right? They can't be in two classes at exactly the same block during the day. So they have to prioritize, pick and choose which classes they would like to see. We did bring in Eduseer this year as an online platform. We had planned to bring in Eduseer before COVID and the need for remote learning. We're moving away from the platform that is virtual high school. Virtual high school doesn't afford us the flexibility to meet the needs of the kids in the way that we would like to meet them. So we moved to Eduseer as a platform so kids can take high-level courses or some unique electives potentially that we can't offer or can't fit into their schedule. So they might choose to take, an AP class, and rather than totally give up on taking another AP class because it's in the same block, they might now have the opportunity to pursue an AP course through Eduseer Online. We are doing what we can to provide more access and opportunity to courses for our kiddos at the high school. And that's a continued goal moving forward.
Yeah, I
Okay,
guess it's an excellent opportunity for kids to actually go to a college while in high school, because not only do you get to waive out of classes in college, you actually get credit for them. And, my son was able to do that. And, he started with 5 classes worth of credits under his belt the day he walked in the door, which, if you look at the total view of people's finances, half a year of college coming out of high school is not a bad deal.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
okay. I'll just go to one more question from Evan. And actually, before we move on too much further, and Evan, I'll let you get to your question. One of the other thing, I just wanted to make sure that if anybody had any questions related to, because the schools and technology was part of what was on the agenda, but I don't want to keep everybody here all night, but and I thank everybody for their patience as we go through it. It is the biggest part of the budget for sure. So it is a very important discussion to have. Evan, to you, and again, I would at this point also just try to get a sense of if there were particular questions that any of you had regarding technology in the schools. Think about those now as well. So.
Thank you. I just another question regarding sort of I appreciate all the data that you guys received from all the testing standpoints, and then the leadership discussion as to the needs of the school, and then the teachers' input as well. I'm just curious if it's been if you've had direct input from the students as well as to what they feel their needs are in terms of just the acute and also sort of more down the line and whatnot, or if it's primarily just been data driven and higher up driven and whatnot.
So I do have opportunities to talk with the kids. They, through my entry process, talked more about the load that they feel, the stress that they feel, the amount of time they spend on homework, as an example. When kids at the high school level are telling me that they sleep 4 hours a night because they have so much work, that's a problem. And I didn't hear it just from 1 or 2 of them. I heard that broadly in multiple ways, through the forums I had when I first arrived in the district, and through my lunch forums with the kids, when I could actually, sit with kids during lunch. And I've had some Google Meets with them too, but generally speaking, when I meet with them, their focus in the conversation tends to go toward the need for some social emotional relief, from the academic load that they're carrying. And I think that there's, multiple ways to look at that. It's not just a homework-based issue. How we counsel and guide kids into their course selection, is part and parcel of it. The fact that, parents override recommendations to put their kids in more challenging classes, contributes to some of that as well. It's a big conversation to have, but that's the kind of focus that I hear from kids most often. They aren't really talking to me about more opportunities, with one exception. Mr. Cassidy might recall 2 years ago, we met with 2 young gentlemen from the high school seeking to bring a junior ROTC program to Lunenburg. And I think if we had been able to do that, we absolutely would have, but they are no longer establishing any new junior ROTC programs. So we do meet with the kids. I will say that the kids don't have any hesitation in reaching out to me directly by email. And we do chat, and I'm looking forward to the day when I can have some lunch drop-ins with the students again in the way that we used to. But those are the kinds of things that they're telling me, and those are the things that we're prioritizing. We know that we need to have a deep conversation at the high school level about the ways in which we're working with kids and our expectations of them, and making sure that there's an appropriate level of challenge and support.
I appreciate that. Real quick last question. It touches on IT as well, actually. Now that the infrastructure is effectively there with all of the upgrades that have been made to the schools, has there been a discussion with snow days coming up in the years moving forward, or kids who, better to keep a kid home who's not feeling well, just to kind of have a remote option at that point on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, so the state has some.
To have that discussion.
The state has some things to say about that level of flexibility. So I can tell you that the Commissioner of Education agreed to allow for remote snow days this year only, is what he said. Only. He emphasized only when he said it. I know that they had looked at that as a possible model in years prior, and they allowed for some pilots in some districts, but it was a little more than a year and a half ago maybe, that they came out and said, no, we're not doing some sort of alternate learning day on an inclement weather day. So right now, looking at that as an option moving forward, right now the state has said no. I don't know if they will reconsider that. Relative to, getting students access when they have to be out sick, the commissioner has been good about saying that even next year, even though there won't be an opt-out model where parents can choose to have their kids as full remote learners, in cases where we've got kids with medical situations that still it's a little bit, too risky to send them into a school, in those situations, on a case by case where medical need needs to be met, we can allow students to remote into a classroom. So having this new technology, I think, is going to be beneficial to us in ways that we probably haven't fully flushed out just yet. But some of what we might imagine that we could do will be limited, by the state regulations.
Great, thank you.
Okay, Dave? Dave, you're muted.
He looked very animated while he was talking. Still can't hear you, Dave.
He was double muted.
There we go. Now everything's working. Like to shift gears briefly to physical facilities. We haven't talked about that at all this evening. And I understand you guys are in the business of educating students, but you're also tasked with a set of buildings that require upkeep. Much of it is facilities that you're not directly involved with major projects that comes through the DPW. And correct me if I'm wrong, because this is third-hand information to me, that you made a statement to the effect recently in a meeting that the school district is dedicated to maximizing the life of the buildings you presently have. Is that a correct statement? I don't know where I heard that from, but it was within the last week or two.
I could be wrong, but I think that might have been something not exactly expressed that way by Mr. Londa. Mr. Cassidy, might you have some recollection of a statement to that effect?
It's actually not that important right at this
Yeah.
point. I was
I
just
don't
wondering if I had heard it correctly. More importantly is that, and I'm sure you're very acutely aware of the exchanges between Mr. Londa and the Capital Planning Committee at their last meeting. And it raised a very grave concern with the Capital Planning Committee that prioritization of a life safety systems over a number of other projects that from my perspective, I'm going to speak for myself this evening in that regard, were much lower priorities than a life safety system that's been problematic for a very long time. And I compare what's going on with that system to the presentation that we got from Monty Tech. And if you heard in that presentation, over the years previous to COVID, Monty Tech had completely upgraded their fire alarm system proactively, their air handling systems proactively, and it's brought them into the last year in a much better position to deal with it. I honestly, I've been in town all my life. I haven't seen proactivity, especially within the school district and even in the town, to maintain its buildings. Would you be willing to speak to that briefly?
Yeah, I would say that, that it has, the fire alarm system at the primary has been problematic for the last couple of years. It's under a specific set of conditions. Mr. Londa has, successfully been able to troubleshoot some of that for some time, but it seems that the trouble is increasing in frequency. And he's done some investigative work relative to just doing some repairs. The challenge, as you are probably aware, the company that designed that system is no longer in operation. We can't get replacement parts. So now you're talking about, rather than just repair, you're talking about really an overhaul and essentially replacement of the entire system. Again, our trouble time is in the winter months with the cold, which is, again, where Mr. Londa realized that this is becoming more and more problematic. This is a greater frequency event that's happening, and it's becoming a more urgent matter that needs attention beyond troubleshooting and some upgrade maintenance type effort, which is why he, brought that forward. I would say that clearly, because that was not an approved request. Next year, when you see the 10-year layout of projects for the schools, that is definitely going to be part of that project.
I guess
Okay.
my only point, and it was made at the capital planning meeting by another member, is that when you have a system that's no longer supported for X number of years, then proactivity should be kicking in well before where we're at now, in my opinion, excuse me, that, you're going to be in trouble down the road because replacement parts are going to disappear, so on and so forth. So that's the point where you look at a complete revamp of the system, not when it's already cost you all kinds of issues and potentially the loss of your monitoring company. Anyway, it was, I kind of felt like we shot the messenger at the capital planning meeting. And it was stated that, our concerns really were directed back to the school committee and the superintendent, as well as Mr. Wander. Thank you.
I just want to make a comment on this. I got to tell you, as an observer who's not on either the school committee or the capital planning committee, I think this situation could have been handled a whole lot better. And I think that I think everybody will admit there was probably some miscalculations that came into play here. But at the end of the day, we talk about not properly maintaining our buildings. And there's over $300,000 of capital work that ought to be done at the primary school that this year we're not doing. So we say one thing and we do another. And that's exactly what we're doing this year. And we all own it.
Okay. That brings us to the end of the public schools presentation to the Finance Committee. I appreciate all of the information that was shared, and I appreciate all the questions that came forward. And I'm going to take it that since nobody raised their hand to ask any questions related to technology, that we truly are at the end of the Lunenburg Public Schools presentation and can move on. Thank you very much for coming tonight. And thank you for a fulsome presentation. Thank you.
2 hours. Thank you very much.
We only get
Thank
the one chance a year to have these conversations, and there's a lot going on at the schools that we're, happy to fill you in on. So maybe we
Appreciate
need to revisit the informal, the informal visit.
Well, next year when there's a new chair, I'm sure that they'll be happy to take that up. And actually, yes, there's a lot to be said for the informal meetings, and it'll be nice to be able to meet in person again. That would be.
Yeah, for sure.
Honestly, thank you all very much for your very thoughtful questions and the opportunity to explain how we're thinking about things in the school department.
And
Appreciate it.
thank you for your support always.
Thank you.
Have a good
So
night.
much.
All right, so that's going to bring us into the moneyed articles, and I just as a heads up, we already discussed the potential for moving the personnel and salary discussion outside of this meeting, so we probably won't get to that tonight unless anybody is itching to.
I think that makes sense, seeing that Heather Schrock is not here either, and she's the one that requested it, so.
All right, and then unless there's anything with the FinCom warrant letter that you wanted to discuss, Peter, I'm just hoping that people have been getting back to you with any feedback that they have on what you've already presented.
I actually have not gotten any comments, and we've deferred that conversation a couple of times. So I'd
Well, I
like to
already
get
told you I thought it was brilliant. And you just needed to fill in the numbers. I don't know
Thank
what else
you.
you want from me.
I appreciate it. It was
Okay.
good. I appreciate your comments. But in the form of email, I have not gotten any comments.
Okay.
We can handle it however you'd like. I do think at some point, before we approve it, it does need to get discussed publicly. So,
Okay, we'll talk about it then next week. I'll put it on after the public hearing.
and if anybody has any comments or hasn't read it, please do and comment back, and I will incorporate your comments or discuss with you prior to next week's meeting.
Okay, all right. Heather, are you, I see you're unmuted. Would you like somebody else to put up the articles?
Yes, please.
Okay. Do we have any volunteers to put up the articles?
Yeah, I just, I did it differently this time, and I've got stuff all over my,
I have them open if you want.
if you have them open, that'd be great if you could do it.
Sure.
A mess going on here.
Okay,
Give me 1 second.
I'm glad I drank my espresso at the beginning of the meeting.
appreciate that, yes.
Thank you for your patience, Heather.
Not a problem.
Do we want this bigger at all at this point?
If you can get it a little bit bigger, that would be probably,
This is what we look at. Looking at the wrong screen.
of course, if I go stand at the TV, I can probably read it, but yeah, that looks fine.
All right. So I think, was this the one I sent today?
I believe so.
Okay.
If you scroll down to the end and you start to see red,
Yeah, it says 3/18.
there you go. Yeah, okay.
All right. So the first two articles, those are standard. articles. The revolving funds, there's no changes from last year's accounts or spending limits. So those have remained the same. If you go down to, so right now we have no prior year expenses. That's number C or letter C. And at this point, no prior year expenses. That could change before town meeting. But at this point, we know of none. D, we right now have no amendments to the budget. I'll work with Karen and the DPW snow and ice budget to see if we expect surplus in town. Where we can.
Heather, you're really hard to hear.
You hear me better?
Yes.
Yes.
Well, you sound fine and then you go in and out. So,
Okay. Could be, I don't know. I'm having a problem tonight. So for the amendment article for this current year budget, I'll be working with Karen and the DP regarding the snow and ice budget to finalize what's needed to cover the deficit and if we're going to have a surplus funds within this year's appropriation to cover that. If not, that would be one of the appropriations that we would need to handle under that article. The capital plan, I will have a finalized version for you for next. Working again, discussed this last week on unexpended capital amounts. So we think we've pinpointed what we need to remain in the paving. Sorry, not the paving. That's one of the costs. The fuel tank project. And that would leave us surplus of 59,000 or available towards capital. We have some other unexpended capital items that we got as well. So
Is there a dashboard update yet, or is that we're going to see that next week? Because it's hard to follow again.
I will have one before next week's meeting.
Okay.
And under the capital, the goal would be to add additional projects that were in the order of the priority. So looking for the next two projects on the capital plan, which would be the master plan for Marshall Park and the DPW vehicle. I talked to the DPW director yesterday about that, and because, which is, I'm going to knock on wood, we're expected to be fully staffed soon, and with that added personnel and the possibility of another person for facilities, that makes the DPW vehicle more important would be short vehicles otherwise. Moving on to the fiscal 22 budget. So that all those figures I'll send out a comprehensive list so you have it all in one spreadsheet with all the line items. You've kind of gotten it as we've been going along for each budget so that we can look at it comprehensively. And the collective bargaining agreements we will not have done by next Thursday. I can tell you that. We've been diligently working, with the unions. We started in February. We're meeting with 3 different unions right now. So we averaging about 2 meetings a week, with 2 different units. So our goal and hope would be that it would be done in advance to give enough time to give it considerable thought for the cost of the first year of the agreement. So we're working towards that, but it will not be done by next Thursday.
Is we not having the specifics in the warrant, though, doesn't preclude us from getting it in at town meeting with the article itself as written, right?
Right. No. And we're operating under, the unions have agreed as well. So DPW would be, they're looking for a 3-year agreement, and clerical and fire are both in agreement for get us back on track with 2-year agreements. So they're worded such. The stabilization fund, Karen did that calculation. The 100,000 exceeds our minimum. Brings us to like 5.93% instead of the 5%. So I would recommend we maintain that 100,000. That would come out of free cash. We deposit it into the regular stabilization account. The special purpose stabilization account, waiting on money amounts for other articles. I would like to make a recommendation that we make a deposit into that account as well this year. They've already updated the board, that committee, that I would like to not remove money from that account for the 211,000 for the DPW purchase. Instead deposit funds into that. We have available funds through free cash, but I want to finalize the other money articles before providing a recommendation for that account. My ultimate goal would be to try to get that account as close to possible to the amount we need for the 2 large fire apparatuses, the rescue truck and the fire engine, that are in fiscal 26 and fiscal 27. So if we were able to fund those 2 purchases with this account, that would be ideal.
That would be a major feat right there.
Yes. We're close. We are close, but far away. But our balance in that account, the special purpose stabilization, is $1,198,705. So we would need approximately 325,000, I think, to get us to that. The OPEB trust fund, that article, those numbers are finalized. They haven't changed. The 180,418 for the town side, that would come out of free cash, and $656 from sewer retained earnings. That's what sewer is contributing for OPEB. The solid waste disposal program, I talked to the finance director about this, and we can vote on that budget with the 302,000 that we, same as last year. What Department of Revenue would want to make sure when we submit is that we are receiving at least in revenue for that program. So when we finalize our contract with Casella, and if there's an impact that we have to raise the bag fees to cover the cost of operations, to cover the expenses, then the revenues would be greater than 302,000. So we look to just break even with that enterprise account to cover the cost of the program and not make money.
So, Heather, can you explain? Obviously, I'm assuming this is not going to be negotiated before town meeting, or what's your expectation on timing?
Well, we are sending out the bids. They went out today, due back April 8th. So pending, it's a complicated bid, so it's going to take a little bit of review to go through it and negotiations with the company. So I don't think by town meeting that we'll have a finalized contract, that would be great. But we'll have at least an idea of what the impact will be.
So assuming that the bag fees need to be adjusted, is that a Board of Selectmen vote? How do we get there with, if we're taking a vote at town meeting that is based on a certain amount, but we don't actually know what our cost or revenues are going to be? Is it the Board of Selectmen that would make that adjustment, or how does that work?
Last time that was presented at a Board of Selectmen's meeting. We kind of did it as a public hearing process, but it's basically we're showing all the expenditures, projected expenditures, what we need to run the program, and that the cost of the bags, the cost of disposal, everything included.
So it's within the authority of the Board of Selectmen to make it work, basically.
Yes.
Okay.
Heather, when you said this out to bid, is it only for continuing with the yellow bags, or I know a lot of towns now go to the big,
Barrels.
what's that?
Barrels.
Yeah, the big barrels, one for recycling and one for trash. Or are we locked into one solution and therefore locked into which vendors are kind of set up with those kinds of trucks?
It's set up as a curbside. There is, we had looked into the cost of getting barrels town-wide before, and it was significant expense. And that was many years ago. I think it was between 60 and 100,000 just to add in those barrels. So right now it's set up as continuing with the bag program.
When you say 60 to 100,000, that's for the town to purchase for the town use, or for citizens to purchase for their own use, or the town would give them to you? Like, what is that?
The
What does that
town
mean?
give them, provide them.
They'd provide them to every citizen?
Yes.
Okay.
So we're on to N. That is Water Enterprise Fund. This is, I'll have to review this amount with the finance director to make sure that 25,000, that's what our annual amount for that enterprise is, for those 7 accounts or so that is in that water enterprise. It covers the Water Enterprise Fund. The health insurance fund, that recommendation is maintained at 369, 334. That's the savings that both the town and the school is projected to receive for the premium holiday. And that would be raise and appropriate. The cemetery account, sale of cemetery lots, that figure is provided within the article, and 15,000. I don't know if anyone saw the select board meeting on Tuesday. The chairman of the cemetery commission came to that meeting to discuss the uses, what they're going to be using for those, with those funds. Any questions on that?
Heather, that's actually not town funding, right?
Correct. It's from the actual sale of lots. It goes into a specialized account.
Right, and it's the interest earned on that money, if I have it correctly.
Yes.
Thanks.
Yep. So it's an appropriation made from that account for the care and improvement of the cemeteries. So this is in addition to their operating account in the budget.
How much is that?
For cemetery, I'll tell you in a second. total cemetery is 94 to 39.62. And that covers personnel costs and expense costs.
So that includes salaries?
Yes,
Yeah, that's part of the DPW budget presentation.
yes.
So is the 15,000 for like specific projects?
Yes, they've talked about so flags, markers that it would be spent on, as well as they're working on an old cemetery that they're clearing out and doing a lot of work at that older cemetery, not North or South Cemetery. It's a separate one. It covers costs like that.
Okay.
The Article Q and R are to rescind borrowing amounts. Karen, can you answer any questions on those? Public education government. Excuse me?
What is that? Is that refinancing?
Excess borrowing capacity.
Yeah. So it's rescinding borrowing. That was
Borrowing we didn't do.
Heather, was the 38 million the state's contribution towards that project? But we had to authorize the full amount.
Yeah.
That's
right.
what that big amount is all about.
The PAC budget, 220. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
220,866, and that was the budget they presented to you last week.
Hey, I'm sorry. Can we go back just a second here on R? My understanding was that we did borrow that money technically in the form of bands, right? And then the state, when we went to do the permanent bonding, the state came up with the other half. But is there since we in fact did borrow money, shouldn't that article not be necessary?
Can I speak to that?
Please.
The total authorization for the school project was $72 million. The town only bonded what the state didn't cover. We didn't bond any more than what we actually had to bond, because as the project was going along, we were receiving reimbursements from MSBA. That's the whole reason why they do it the way that they do now, because they pay you up front rather than have you finance the whole project, and it saves on interest costs. So that $38 million figure is the amount that we were not required to borrow, because we received the majority of that $38 million from MSBA, but then we also had some premiums that we got when we issued bonds that we applied to the project in order to reduce the borrowing and that sort of thing. So that $38 million is unborrowed authorization.
Okay.
We had to authorize the project for the full cost.
Yeah, that was entirely news to me. I thought we did it differently than that. So thank you.
No, in the old days, we used to borrow for the full amount and then get the reimbursement. But now it's different. It's much better.
Okay.
T, that's one of I'm waiting for a cost for. Just one update on that. Part of that article was going to be survey work, and the DPW director, in looking at getting quotes for that, discovered that Dillis and Roy had done some work on that property 10 to 12 years ago for a developer that was looking to purchase it. So In order to update that survey, it's gonna cost about $750, and we're gonna pay for that out of this year's budget through the facilities. So that's one less expense under that article.
At what point does there have to be an article to like tear the building down if we're gonna, beautify the space? That was,
I'm gonna keep it.
About 10 years from now.
I'm gonna keep it.
gonna have climbing vines around the outside of the building. Okay,
U is not a money article. That language is still being worked on by the select board. They'll be finalizing that at their March 30th meeting. And the committee is going to vote on a recommendation for that, since I don't perceive there to be finance. Article V is to hear a report from the TCP Building Design Committee. And U is a funding article, which we're waiting on an amount for that article as well. And Article X and Y are planning board articles.
When do we expect to get the amount on Article W?
Wow. Mr. Cassius, I wasn't at last night's TCP Building Design Committee meeting. Did you have an update on that?
No, I do not. We didn't have enough information. Our chair was still working on some information from the architectural firm, and I think he needed to touch base with you, Heather, on a few more things too. So our next meeting is in early April 7th, I believe it is.
okay, so that's gonna be one that we're gonna have to wait on then. We probably wouldn't make a recommendation
All right.
because we won't have a number by next week's public hearing. Okay,
Moving on to double A. I'm sorry, Z. That's the APR article.
oh, okay, yeah. Yeah, the APR presentation on Tuesday night was helpful.
Yes. And hopefully the information I sent was helpful as well.
Yeah.
Talked
Did
to-
Yes, it
anybody
was.
have any questions about that? Because I'm pretty comfortable with it now.
Yeah, the fact that it's in perpetuity is kind of the critical thing for
Yeah.
me.
The only change from the last time you saw this warrant article, and Michelle Padula addressed this on Tuesday night, was the acreage is where is it? 109 acres, because the property owners are gifting 10 acres of land towards APR.
Do you know if the, and I was unable to watch on Tuesday night, do you know if the, what properties the Pierce family is retaining that are bordering that property?
I do not. That there's a map that was sent out with all the materials I sent to finance and select board. So would have to do some further research on what other properties around that they own.
Yeah, because I mean, the reality is that there's some, if you own adjacent properties, theoretically, there's some betterment to your property. If when you go to sell it, you know that the giant farmland behind it isn't going to be turned into a housing development. Now, I'm not saying that sways my opinion one way or the other, but it might. Like, I think that the total value to the Pierce family needs to be considered here. And I think that there's an additional benefit here that goes beyond the $665,000.
So
Peter,
benefit
you can bet they wouldn't be doing this if it didn't benefit them.
Well, $665,000 is going to benefit them. I understand that, but there are adjacent properties here, I believe, that are coming. I think that if we're being asked to fund this, that it needs to be we need a full wide aperture on this. And I'm still not sure that we have that.
Well, it's indicated on a map that was sent out in paperwork to us. Is that what you were saying, Heather?
That were the outline of the parcels that was under APR. Yes.
Okay. And then I'm going to assume that when it also gets to town meeting in May, that would be part of the presentation as well. But yeah, for next week, we'll just have to go back and pull that information up in terms of those parcels that they're identifying.
Peter, if you can maybe just send a little more information what you're looking for, and I can.
Sure.
flesh that
Okay.
out.
Yep.
All right. We are on to now
Double
double.
A. Yeah.
This is a sewer enterprise article.
Okay.
And nothing's changed since they presented to you their budget. Their capital reserve stabilization fund article, the amounts in there, and that would be out of retained. So DC is the salary administration plan bylaw. This personnel committee is meeting on Tuesday. They will likely be making a recommendation to delay the portion of this on the longevity in the fall. So it would just keep that current language intact until it's changed at a future town meeting. But it would address the positions that need to be added to the grid. DD and EE are both citizen petitions. One being the firearms, about firearms on town conservation properties, and EE is to add a parcel to the sewer service zone.
That's a citizen petition or from the water district?
No, citizen petition.
Yeah, it must not be part of we had a citizen petition on that last year as well. Adding a parcel to the sewer service district.
Okay, so it's not the one, okay, it's a different property.
Then which?
The one
Then the
that
one
the
from
water
last year?
district is taking up with respect to the
Howard.
O'Brien.
Oh, the development?
Yeah. Is it related to that?
Northfield Road.
Yeah.
I don't know where Chestnut is.
I don't
It's
think
5
it's related.
Chestnut
Off
Street.
Island. Off Island.
I don't think it's related.
Okay.
No, it's
No, so we're-
it's probably the owner at 5 Chestnut Street, so. Wanting to have sewer access.
Just for everybody's benefit, I believe the annual meeting for the water department is next Saturday, and that article is due to be taken up again in a different form.
And that's the one on the development.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
8 to 10, and then the meeting starts at 10.
Okay. Just to go back, Chris, I think that when you had brought up the question related to the solid waste disposal, I think the total cost to the town would probably end up being significantly higher than the cost of the barrels, because it would be really, really hard to try to figure out how to charge each household for the amount of trash dumped. Right now, they just do
By
it
the
based on the
barrel.
number of bags purchased. But yeah, they're not going to count how many barrels they picked up.
I think other towns, you have to purchase an additional barrel per year if you want to go
Or
over
this,
the,
or there may be a rental fee for the barrel, monthly fee for the barrel.
yeah.
Shirley switched over to this in the last year or so. We should be able to get some info from them.
Yeah, if we wanted to go that route. I think that where I don't know how much the information that would be probably interesting would be to how much of the cost of trash removal is paid by the town of Shirley and how much is paid by the residents. Because right now, all of the cost is picked up by the residents for the bag system, so.
We're supplementing that, aren't we, on the recycling side?
No,
Yeah.
we're not supplementing the cost
We
of the removal of the trash. We're supplementing the cost of the recycling.
Right.
Unless I have that wrong, Heather. You can tell me I'm wrong.
No, I think that's correct.
But I recall last year or the year before, there was some
We amended
overage in the
Just-
direction of the trash, but I can't remember how it worked.
yes, we went from paying nothing for recycling, actually,
Oh, right,
refund
right.
Cool.
Okay, that was it.
to getting charged for recycling.
And then having somebody come out to like make sure people weren't putting trash in the recycling. Yeah.
Recycling rescue kit program, yeah.
Can we get contractor bags?
Contractor bags?
Yeah, because I put them in a contractor bag so that they don't rip the yellow bags. Those bags are awful.
Yeah, then
Yeah,
That's
So
I-
I'm just using like all sorts of extra useless plastic, where if I just had contractor yellow bags, life would be great.
I tell you, I see the complaints on Facebook about it, and I was with you guys like a year ago. The new ones, I think, are working fine. I don't know what people are doing to these bags.
Are they loading them too heavy or
I don't
putting
know.
sharp objects?
I
They've
found
shifted
that
again.
the large were weak.
They're not as bad as a year ago, but they're
They're
months ago. It's very
Yeah, we
Whether you
moved
have trash in it or not.
spring. Yeah, so I think that may have something to do with it, but it's the same millimeter.
Yeah, so a contractor bag would solve all of our problems.
I'll tell you guys, I get every cubic inch out of my trash bags and I have not broken a single one.
I don't break them. I don't know what people are doing.
Yeah, I don't know what the issue is. I agree.
Okay, so now we're really getting tired and far afield. All right.
Hey, Peter, in
Heather.
answer to your question earlier about the adjoining properties on the agricultural land, a quick look shows two-family plots separate from the agricultural land that I would assume would be kept privately owned because they have residential homes on them.
At least, yeah.
Yeah.
Michelle gave a good presentation. It's worth finding
I'll
that
go back and watch it.
point
Yeah.
in the video. And
I missed it also, so I will.
Yeah, it was a good presentation. Any questions on any of the other moneyed articles?
Yeah, Heather, I'd like to get a copy of the solid waste bid that went out. And two comments that I make on that. Did we look at how the routes are done to see if we can maybe get down to 4 days instead of 5? One issue I had, I believe it was done by precinct at one time. I don't know if it still is or not, but I recall I was over on Beachview Road that was a split road, that we'd have the trash truck on going in there into Hickory Hills twice a week because it was a split precinct. And the other issue I have is now that I'm on Lake Shirley, I'm on a Friday pickup. When there's a holiday, you don't get picked up till a Saturday. And when there's a problem with the truck, you don't get picked up till Monday. That's really annoying on a weekend.
So the bid reflects maintaining a 5-day schedule. Doesn't mean that we could maybe negotiate something different. That's the first time I've heard that type of complaint about a 5-day schedule.
Well, my thing would be to really look at it, see if they're going by neighborhood or if they're following like what the precinct route was.
yeah, Jay, that's the first time I've heard that one too. Have you vetted that through
Well-
Facebook?
No, I've actually,
Facebook poll.
it may have changed, but I know when I lived in Hickory Hills, the only reason I found out was if I happened to be home on vacation for the week, that the truck came 2 days a week, I think Tuesdays and Thursdays. It was on a Thursday pickup, and I was trying to figure out why they were doing that. And it's because Beachview Road is a split precinct.
It does seem like Beachview Road is like right in the edge of town too. Like
Yeah,
that's so
but it
weird.
was,
Yeah.
it's weird, but, because I thought, you know, the trash would go more by neighborhood to try and keep it going in as, you know, as tight a circle as possible.
And what we used was the current list, the route that Casella does now with the list of roads.
Yeah.
All right, with that, moving right along. Minutes, we don't have any. Committee and department reports. We don't need any. But Dave's gonna give us some anyway.
Yeah, very, very quickly, because we, you know, TC Passio's design committee met. I don't even remember what night now. This week has been something else.
Right.
Well, last night, wasn't it? It feels like it was about 6 months ago. Anyway, we discussed, you know, our path forward to town meeting, and discussed a few talking points that we want to investigate, and starting to work on our points for the presentation for town meeting. And I pretty much think we committed to coming up with that number for the article at that next meeting. So that's pretty much all we did that last night.
Okay. Town manager, finance director reports, any?
The only update I have is regarding the earmark for the fire alarm upgrade at primary. So I had reached out because we still hadn't received our, normally after an earmark is approved, whatever state agency, the budget, it falls under their budget, sends us a standard contract initiate, and we still hadn't received anything. So I reached out to legislators to find out which state agency it was going to be under. They got me in touch with the contact at that agency, with the Executive Office of Administration.
Heather, you're hard to hear again.
Yeah.
I've faded out again.
So I got in touch with the state agency through a contact provided by our state legislator. And when I talked to them, I asked, because I still hadn't got the contract yet, when those funds needed to be used by, and it is June 30th, 2021. So I asked what recourse we could to extend that. And our only recourse would be through a supplemental budget bill or the fiscal 22 state budget that would have to be both done by the state legislature. So after talking to that individual, I reached out again to our legislators to ask them to make that request, whichever came first, whether it be, there's no pending supplemental budget bill at this moment, so it's probably going to be the fiscal 22 state budget, but they would have to make that request.
Heather, if I could ask a question also about the bond bill that was passed last year, I believe it was. Representative Hay was the one that brought the questions forward at the very last minute there as to, you know, what funding we might want to be looking for through that bond. But as part of that bond bill, there were a number of grant programs that were funded. Have you gotten any notification on any of those grant programs actually being administered?
No, not.
Because that was municipal infrastructure. There was all kinds of stuff in there, and it was supposedly funded.
Nothing that I'm aware of. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Just asking the question.
And I
Thank
continue to ask for bond. Yeah.
Yep.
So
And-
the money on the fire alarm is 25,000. Was that correct?
Yes, but that was also, so when our legislators asked what our priorities were, that additional funding needed for that project was top of the list.
And what is the cost of the project as estimated right now?
127.
There's also another 100,000 that's still tied up in a bond bill also.
Mhm.
That was set aside for that project, but not
For that
released.
project?
Yes.
Yeah, which they're aware of.
Yep. I bring it up about once a month.
And then
Well,
the,
I mean, this seems to me that, it's something where this is a problem that is it's a ticking time bomb. And when that time bomb goes off, we're going to have to fix it. And if it goes off in October of next year, we're going to have to fix it in October of next year. So in my mind, now I think there's plenty of finger pointing and blame to go around on this one. It was handled poorly, but I think that we have an opportunity to affect a path to fix this and address it in a way that is proactive. Now, this committee can have some bearing on that, and we can say, we think that this needs to get funded through the capital plan. I don't know if there's an appetite for that. I would vote for it today. But I think that this is one of those things where we can all look back, if this really goes sour, and it very well could, inside the next fiscal year, we can all point at each other and say it's everybody else's fault, but I think we have an opportunity here to address this.
what's the cost of the total cost of the project was 127,000?
Yes. Mhm. And I don't know if I was clear when I said we've had, for our budget priorities that we gave to the state for the fiscal 22 state budget, the remainder of that cost of that project was top of the list.
But just like we did with the fuel tanks, we could fund it and ask the state for money at the same time. There's a precedent there.
No, I just wanted to make sure I was clear.
And Peter, we talked about that at the capital planning meeting too. I mean, I specifically asked the question. I think it got asked a couple of different ways, but basically what I asked was if it shuts down or a catastrophic event happens and the entire system is non-functional tomorrow, do we have the capability of doing what we have to do to get that building back up and running in a very short order? And I think Heather said yes.
My response was about funding. It would have to come out of the reserve fund through the finance committee and the school budget until it could be otherwise addressed.
Okay, so basically, I mean, I don't really understand the problem with because obviously I don't pay attention to the capital planning committee meetings and the school committee meetings, but the question that I would have related to that would be, is it possible that over a Saturday night that the fire alarm would fail to work and the fire department failed to respond, and the problem could be even bigger than whether or not the fire alarm system works?
My
Is that the
understanding,
problem?
my read
I don't
on this
understand
is
what the
that's
problem
not
is.
the likely scenario. The likely scenario is that we get to the point where the false alarms become, I mean, they're already at a point of diminishing returns at certain temperature ranges. So it gets to the point where it just cycles so out of control that it's of no value.
Okay, so the issue isn't that it won't go off. The issue is that
It's going off too much.
Too often.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a different problem.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
So
the school district did not bring it forward as an emergency either. They just put it in place of their non-funded other project for that building. And I'll leave it at that. I have a personal feeling about it, but I'll leave it at that.
Dave, I agree that there's a problem there, right?
Yeah.
Like,
And I don't disagree that it needs to be
not
fixed.
handled right. That doesn't mean that it doesn't need to be addressed.
Right. And if you listen to my comments at the very beginning of that capital planning meeting, what I said at the end of the meeting contradicted what I said at the beginning. Because I did say that it was a life safety issue and that we had no choice but to fund it. But at the end of the day, we didn't.
So perhaps someone could present it to this board because it's never been presented to us.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the best avenue at this point would be, because if it was supposed to go through capital planning and it didn't approach us through capital planning, and it didn't come through the school department, I don't know if the only other, well, and actually the warrants are closed now, so it wouldn't be able to come through as a separate warrant article, so.
We could make an amendment to the capital plan.
Is that something that
Make
could
an
be?
amendment at town meeting,
Yeah, it'd have to be done on the town meeting floor.
town meeting floor.
Okay,
But it would have a whole lot more bearing if it came from the finance committee as a whole, or a majority of the finance committee, than Pete Beardmore and somebody from the state, you know.
Terry, just so you
Well,
know,
they-
it was on their extended capital plan for next year. They didn't choose to move it up until they didn't get the money for the AC system.
okay, I'm not gonna question why something moved or it didn't move, and I'm not sure that I wanna take up at this point, and maybe it would be something that we could discuss, you know, on one of the April meetings, is to whether or not the amendment would be brought forward by the finance committee, or the finance committee would just speak in support of an amendment to an article if it was brought forward, or not. Because basically, yeah, I don't feel like I have enough information at this time to be able to make a determination, regardless of who, you know, like regardless of what went wrong. The question is, is it truly creating a safety issue, or is the fire department getting too much
nuisance.
practice getting out? So
Is
To
it
me, it would-
possible to do $25,000 worth of the solution, or is it an all or nothing solution?
I think it's an all or
The
nothing.
system's obsolete,
It's we literally have to change the vendor of the whole deal.
the whole thing.
Again, I have no clue what it is because it's never come before this committee.
Exactly,
It just came
exactly.
up.
And
That's why,
School committee was here tonight and they didn't even bring it up. They could have had a slide on it saying it was a below the line capital request.
yeah.
Have they started like soliciting price quotes for a bid package? To have something in place?
I'm sorry, can you say that again, Jay? I didn't-
They know that 127 is a good number. Because
Okay.
it was
From what?
originally Heather, it was 179, I think, originally.
Yeah, it was definitely, I can tell you.
Yeah. And they had,
Is
They-
that
they-
a budget number, or have they actually solicited, you
No,
know,
they
that- it would
legitimate?
just be quote.
solicited numbers. And
Yeah.
they got it down by realizing that they did not have to replace certain components, but the major components do have to be replaced. That's all the smoke detectors to the tune of 200 and some odd individual smoke detectors, all the pull stations, and the main receiving panel.
Heather, is there a scenario where we would would come out of next week with an unappropriated revenue number that might cover this? So if we were to make an amendment at town meeting, we wouldn't have to recalculate all of the money articles to do it?
Yes, we'll have excess free cash.
Okay. So what I would propose then is that I would like to invite the superintendent and Mr. Londa to a meeting in a couple of weeks after we have the public hearing and hear this out, because I don't think that the school committee or the capital planning committee has it hasn't satisfied me. And I feel like as the finance committee, we have the capacity to intervene on a financial matter like this.
Well, we certainly have a.
Review and recommend.
Yep.
Yeah, so
Why
basically,
would you do
yeah.
it?
I'm sorry, Jay, go ahead.
Why would you do it at the public hearing?
Well, because I'm
wouldn't-
just,
Yeah, no, I wouldn't want to do it at the public hearing because basically the public hearing, we're going to deal with the warrant and it's not going to be on.
It's not on the warrant.
So basically, the only time a change can be made would be when it's on the town meeting floor. So rather
Right.
than mix it up with all the warrant articles, I would just as soon take it as
Yep.
a separate issue and determine whether or not we as a committee would want to support the amendment to a warrant article to include that.
So at the public hearing, will the entire capital budget be on the
Yeah.
filled in by next week?
Yeah.
Okay.
Did they have a time frame on how long it would take to replace the system?
I don't recall, do you?
I don't remember anything like that being discussed, no.
Okay. So
And
the only
Terry,
other,
just one comment I was going to make is I would assume they do it when the school's not in session.
they're not going to not be in session because now they have to do summer school. So,
Well, they're not doing it at that
Usually-
level.
the only, and a completely unrelated question before I let you go, because I know that it's been a long night for you. Is there anything, I know that the legislators and everybody was going to be getting together to try to work out whether or not we were going to be able to have a COVID vaccine site in this area. Did they have that? And was there any?
So supposedly there was going to be a meeting yesterday between Senator Cronin, Secretary Sutters, the Neshoba Associated Boards of Health regarding getting a regional site in Devens.
Okay, so there's nothing out of that.
I haven't heard, any, and I don't
Okay.
think the decision would be made that quickly anyways.
Well, that's true.
For it, yeah.
No, silly me. Okay. All right, with that, do we have any public comment from anybody on the committee? Dave?
Hi, Terry. Unrelated to the Finance Committee, but I'd like to just get this out there to any citizen that listens to this meeting in the future when it's up on YouTube, so on and so forth. A citizen reached out actually to me, and I passed the information on to the Green Communities Task Force and to the DPW director. In regards to streetlights that are either missing for one reason or another or are non-functional. The list that was presented covered Electric Avenue and Route 2A, and I would say that was south of those two roads. So that area has been pretty much looked at already, and there were a total of, I believe, 12 on the list. I'd like to ask the citizens of Lunenburg and the other areas of town to pay attention after dark. And if you see a streetlight in your neighborhood out, please note the pole number and then contact the DPW and report it. We can complain all we want about streetlights being out, but if we don't report them through the process we're supposed to report them through, they're never going to get fixed, and we're going to end up buying streetlights that don't function. So please contact the DPW department if you have a streetlight out in your neighborhood. Thank you.
Any other public comment? Seeing no other public comments. With that, next meeting is going to be next Thursday, the public hearing for the town meeting warrant. And we'll begin at 7 o'clock with that. And then afterwards, we will discuss the FinCom letter to go in the warrant. And with that, I'm happy to take a motion to adjourn.
We're voting on warrant articles next week, right?
That's correct. Yes, we will be voting on the recommendations for the warrant articles that are being presented. Yes.
Is there anyone that you'd like to invite to that?
I don't know. The only one that's going to be not contested, but the only one that there's going to be questions on is probably going to be related to the capital planning one. But I think that since it can't be changed before it goes to the town meeting, I'm not sure whether it would make any sense to ask for any more information on that at this time. But if anybody else wants to hear from anybody, again, the planning board is having their own public hearing on the warrant articles that they're going to be addressing, and that will be on April 12th.
I will send Heather an email tomorrow about my questions on the, or maybe even call you on the agricultural preservation thing. And I don't anticipate that there's a need to ask somebody to come, but maybe.
Okay.
Harry, if I could make one last comment, that you just reminded me about the planning board articles. I encourage the general public to take a read on those two articles and the information that's involved in those. There are some very definite ramifications to the changes that they are proposing. So please take a read, and there are some dramatic changes in there that could really affect many people in the future, especially businesses. Thank you.
Will there be a fiscal impact to the town?
I've been trying to figure that out. I got to read it through some more.
Okay.
It's, it'll definitely affect stormwater
Individual.
runoff.
Okay.
That's one of the things that I see in it. But anyway, thank
Should
you.
we have the
Is that on
land
the
use director
website?
next week?
The
Land use director come in?
Are the articles posted on the planning board articles on the website?
He
Not-
emailed me this morning because I had put in a request, and he expected they would be on the planning board's web page by the end of the day today.
They should be, because they sent out the notice of the public hearing, so I assume that they have
Right?
those.
They were not there last night. That's why.
Yep.
With respect to whether there's a financial impact and whether we want to take a vote on it, should we put in a placeholder to invite the land use director next week?
There's no budget number. Is there?
Yeah, there's no numbers to be able to make a recommendation one way or the other. So I think that, I mean, basically, I think for next week, it'll come down to a question of, we'll either find no financial impact, or we'll find that we're going to wait until we hear the presentation at town meeting to determine if there's a financial impact.
Fair enough.
And then basically that'll give anybody who's interested time on April 12th to get a good read of what happens at the public hearing, and see whether or not that's what they continue to go forward with at town meeting. So,
Good.
but okay, now can we take a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay, so Chris Menard has a motion to adjourn. Do I have a second?
Second,
Where did I hear the second from?
Evan Waters.
Evan? Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
It's like, everybody moves around on my screen when they talk. Okay, so all in favor, Chris, Peter,
Aye.
Dave,
No.
you're already outvoted. Jay,
Aye.
Evan,
Aye.
and I for myself. Good night, everybody. Thank you
Good
so
night.
much. And thank you, Heather and Karen.
Good night.
Good night.